Do you think this will work?
Yeah, snug.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am Fibonacci, a sentient spaceship. The Nerdy Photographer is currently bouncing through alternate dimensions, and I am working with Golden Hour on a plan to use an artificial intelligence to draw a door in reality to let the Nerdy Photographer return through. Golden and I have been contemplating both the scientific and ethical ramifications of such a procedure.
Snug?
Yes, I will introduce the episode. On this episode of the Nerdy Photographer Podcast, Casey speaks with digital artist and image editor Andrew Kavanagh about Photoshop, image manipulation, AI editing software, and much more. All of that coming up after the break.
Snug.
But how do we shut it off once we start it?
Hey photographers, have you noticed how the life goes out of your subject's eyes when you tell them how to pose? You say, stand there, put your arm like this. It gets even worse when you have subjects who are a bit shy or introverted. If you want to create authentic, emotional photos, my Let's Be Real Unposed photography prompts will help you create interactions that your clients will remember when they look back on their photos for years. I've developed my Unposed photography prompts over 20 years, taking pictures of people using my own self-conscious nature to help my clients who felt that they were unphotogenic. From couple sessions to weddings and family portraits, these prompts will help you get more dynamic and natural photos with your subjects. And right now, you can get 25% off if you use the code POD25P. That's POD, P-O-D, 25P, all uppercase. Just go to nerdyphotographer.com and find the prompts in our store. Stop posing and start prompting. Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and I'm here in this episode with Andrew Kavanagh. Welcome, Andrew.
How you doing? Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on. You take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yes, so I am a Photoshop and Lightroom tutor. I do photo editing, retouching, photo compositing, and I'm a digital artist. I went to school for fine arts and was a printmaking major, painting, drawing, printmaking. And then in time, after doing some illustration work and working for galleries in New York City, and as an artist assistant, I took some classes at School of Visual Arts, fell in love with Photoshop, and then built up my portfolio where I worked in advertising in New York, doing photo compositing, retouching. And then in time, I started doing my digital artwork that I love.
Awesome. We're going to have to talk after we're done with this. I'm going to have to talk to you about, like, I work with a lot of galleries and stuff as a
Cool.
We'll have to discuss after this.
Great.
So you've been using, we're going to talk about a lot of image manipulation, photo editing software and things like that. Like, I've been using Photoshop since it came out. Like I was young, but it was, it was still black and white, and it wasn't really much to do with photos, because you had to get a scan a photo in, and it didn't look very good. But what do you think? Like, there's been a lot of changes in photo editing recently, like not just with Photoshop, but just like across the board with the mobile apps, various other applications that have come out in recent years. What do you think the most significant changes are that you've seen in image editing software in recent years?
Right. So I started around the same time as well, early 90s. And, that's when I took the classes at School of Visual Arts. And there was like this Mac box that looked like a shoebox, beige. And I remember everything being black and white. And I was like, what? But I did see kind of the possibility with Photoshop. So obviously I stuck with it. And in time, it got better and better. So in terms of, the significant changes, I would say that one of the most biggest one is artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
So in the case of Photoshop, they call it Adobe Sensei. and it's used to read information in an image and retouch for you with simple keyboard shortcuts or menu choices like content aware fill, or clicking a button to select a subject or to delete the background from a subject in the properties panel. And it automatically adds a layer mask for you to then fine tune your image. Um, Also, non destructive editing with things like smart objects and smart filters. Great way to make multiple changes to an image without losing quality,
Or
as well
losing
as
a part,
and losing what?
or erasing a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you don't have to create a new extra layers or a new image itself. So,
Yeah, I would say that AI has got to be like up there at the top because I mean, it's just like you look at things like Luminar and just like the
right,
things that
sky replacement
sky
and
replacement or like the just it blows my mind when I'll sit there like I'll pull a portrait, it's especially in portrait, like changing people's faces like almost completely in a matter of seconds with just a couple sliders, and it's just like this is stuff that used to take a long time to do, and it's just sort of like I feel like there's like the bar has kind of been lowered a bit to like extreme levels of manipulation. Like
right.
this is the AI has allowed to happen.
Right. Like I'm a bigger fan of, say, the, content aware fill, where
Yeah.
you might have like a photo of a wall that's cracked, and then you make a selection, and then with content aware fill, it reads the information around it and does a kind of, artificial intelligence retouch for you. But when it comes to, like, say, the portrait retouching, I do see a lot of kind of heavy handed usage of it.
Yes.
And it's, overly airbrushed look, or, blurred of the skin with no pores showing. Not a big fan of that. And I myself personally will at times turn down jobs where they say they want that type of look. So I like natural retouching.
I do too. I'm just saying like it's just kind of it's gotten to a stage where like I sit there like I brought my wife in. She was like, "Oh, I need you to take a look at this picture for her job." She's like, "Can you like touch up this person's headshot like real quick?" Like I'm like, "Yeah, that'll take me like 3 seconds." And like she's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I just like hit a button, and she's like, "That used to take you an hour." I'm like, "Yeah, this is
Time
where
to
we are
change.
now. Like it doesn't take nearly as long anymore." And in some you still have to, like you said, there's a lot of heavy handedness out there by people who are I tend to be less experienced or don't want to take the time to learn how to do it kind of in a more natural, like it's especially when it comes to like face and portrait retouching or whatever, like you'll see, like you said, like this, that porcelain skin. That's what I always call it. Like, it's just like,
Right.
looks like a doll. And you're like, that isn't human. And unless that's like what the look you're going for specifically, like, just, I used to work in film and TV and acting. And like, I was
Right.
also a director of things and stuff. You get people's headshots. And like, I would always kind of toss those headshots that I'd get back that like where the people had like skin that looked like way too smooth. Cause I'm like, I don't know what this person actually looks like, and if that's what you're putting out there, I'm not bringing you in because it's just, you don't look like a real human being.
Yeah, not a fan of that look, as well as there's a certain disconnect as well, where a lot of people, see these apps on their iPhone or their Android, and go to this app and they do these simple, finger gestures, and they clean up the skin or do this or transform the image. And then I've had clients reach out to me and then give me like a good quality image, and then ask me to retouch it, and then are surprised that it takes more time than that, or they think that that's kind of the same thing I would do on my computer. And I
Right.
said, no, I'm not dragging my finger across my computer screen. It's a process here.
Yeah,
And
it's one of those things that also happens in photography that I always try to tell people, like, yeah, that there's you can take a picture on Instagram and like slap a filter on it in a second and then throw it out there, and like sometimes it looks good, whatever, but you're not gonna you try to print that image, that's a whole other ball game. And
Right.
if you run any of those, like the app skin smoothing or retouching stuff, like you blow that stuff up once it gets past like the size of your like phone screen, we're talking about a wholly different thing. Like,
Right. They don't really have a good concept of resolution and how many pixels per inch, how that affects your image. So they think they can give you like a really low quality image that they have done to place on, say, Instagram, and then you could make it, print quality. And it's like, no, you have to give me a higher res quality image.
Yeah, I've had people send me images
Yeah.
that it's 300 pixels by 300 pixels, and they're like, "We want to print this," and
It's frustrating because I've ended up like turning down jobs because they send me this really bad quality. They say garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So it's give me a bad quality original image. Even if I retouch it and run it through this filter and sharpen and whatnot, there's only so much you can do. And so, I've had to turn down jobs like that. And it's just, I just wish they had a better original.
Yeah.
So I could also make money,
Yeah. Well, it's also, you're sending me something that's the size of a postage stamp. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I know like Topaz, Gigapixel, or whatever is supposed to be pretty good, but like, you're still not getting a 10 by 10 image out of that.
Right.
Like, printable. It's like, it's not going to look good. So with all of this, like very rapid acceleration and evolving nature of image editing and video editing, what do you have any concerns of how quickly and how easily things are moving in this industry?
Right. So I can see the value of using artificial intelligence, but in the case of what Adobe calls things like neural filters, which is, somewhat recent filters in Photoshop, the latest version, you can now make someone younger or older, with simple sliders or click of a button. And there may be a slew of legal issues in the future where images are submitted in, say, court cases, but are hard to tell if they have been altered digitally with Photoshop. And so that type of legality concerns will pop up more, I think, with, how much has this original image been altered?
Right. It's just, and how easy it is to do now. Like, it's just become like, if you have Photoshop, like you said, the latest version of Photoshop, you can do these things, and it's becoming harder and harder to, like, there are people who, like, forensic experts who can, like, computer forensics, who can tell these things. But yeah, it's becoming
Sure.
a really nebulous gray area ethically in some cases, which, kind of leads me to like another point. Like, at what point with, photo manipulation does a photo stop being a photo and become a digital work, or whatever you want to call it?
Right. But before I answer that one, though, I wanted to just say that one thing that's very concerning to me about the evolution of image editing, video editing, is also the video editing. Like I've seen
deepfakes.
Deepfakes on Facebook, and it's like when it's political people or people in power or positions. You could, if they got that on the media before someone could verify that it was even real, you could create a big stir in different ways. So, and maybe not even in America, but maybe someone creates the deep fake here, but sends it to another country, and then they put that on the media. They could create like a bit of a stir or chaos.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, that concerns me because, like, yeah, deep fakes, or even like Adobe has an audio. Like, they're working on something with audio. It's like, all you do is feed in. You can feed in 2 minutes of somebody talking to it. It can like then create them talking. Like, you just type in, and it'll create a fairly like accurate version of them talking. And it's like, that scares me a lot, because then you can start making those videos with like the audio behind it. It's like that.
Well, I would imagine that they would end up having, say in the different governments, they would have to have a new kind of division where people will be looking into, I don't know, what is real in terms of images, videos, sound bites,
digital fakery.
Right. Like, I'm not sure what they might call it now, and they probably do have something now, of course, but they might like have to have it a little bit more extensive and in depth.
One would hope that they will.
It's what?
One would hope that they would have.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Doing it's very scary, but it's like, the ability to, I see friends like posting like, oh, the face app, or whatever. It's like, oh, here's my face on, this movie character or whatever. And I'm like, hey, you might, like, it seems fun, but there's also you have given your face to whoever runs that app. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's
That's the
that whole
concern that is a big
ethical.
concern I've had too. I've seen a lot of friends who are having fun on these different apps on Facebook, and it's like you do know that they're like mining your information and data, right? I mean, but everyone's having a blast doing it, and it's like,
Yeah, it's well,
I mean, you hear
there was a
something in
whole
the
thing.
news.
There's a whole thing. Uh, I actually posted an article on Nerdy Photographer about it a while ago. I think it may be like almost 2 years now, about like AI faces. Like they're making like,
Yep.
they had people's faces, and I was like, well, you can look at them, and this was 2 years ago. Like you could look at some of them and kind of figure out that, oh, this doesn't seem right. They weren't quite there. But then I looked at something like it was
Yeah,
mid pandemic, and they said, oh, it's upgraded, and you look at it like you can't tell. Like you can't tell now because people have been feeding their faces into these, into the catalog of human, looks, and now like they've taught these computers to how to create all these different, human faces that are totally fake, and that's
right.
another concern.
And then people can, alter, those photos and names for their passports and things like that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a lot of stuff where they keep the government and other forms of screening busier than ever before. So,
absolutely. It's just it boggles my mind. Like I look at those, and like there's one that was like created fake cars. Like there was an AI that they used, like they just fed pictures of cars into, and it created cars. Like
like
photos.
3D printing type of stuff.
No, no,
Okay.
no. Like created like photos of cars that weren't real, that had never been
Wow.
manufactured, but they looked like a real car. And it's just sitting in a like in a scene, because it just like these computers have just analyzed pictures of cars, like millions of them, and now they're just spitting out pictures of cars like that have never been like it never existed, and
Right.
it's
And they're creating new portraits of people too, right? Where
yeah,
you can put in your portrait and then, whatever sequencing that you start in motion, it creates a new variant of you. And
yeah,
yeah,
or those, I don't know if you saw recently,
interesting times.
those ones of like famous historical figures, and they're making them move, like that one. I was like, this is creepy. This is a little bizarre. I was like, I don't know. I think that you and I both are of an age where it's like we lived in a world before this existed, and have kind of like seen it grow and become like as prevalent as it is, that now we feel sort of like how far is this going to go? Like where is this going
Reminds
to?
me of the what was it that the movie with Schwarzenegger where he's going to relax and it's supposed to take him to like a fantasy place,
Yeah,
but
Total
then it
Recall.
turns that's it, Total Recall.
Get your ass to Mars.
Sounds just like it. But yeah, wasn't that the one where the scene where like he's trying to get through as a woman and then the
Yeah,
face kind of opens up? Yeah, that was great.
that's
Yeah,
him.
that reminds me of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, that's a Philip K. Dick novel originally that
Yeah,
that's
great.
based on, and
Great.
like he predicted so much,
Yeah,
like
that's great.
stuff, and like him and Asimov and others, the things that exist now that were science fiction, and I think that's more because like their science fiction was rooted in science fact. But now like we're seeing these things actually
Take
happen.
place.
Yeah, I want my flying car though. I'm still waiting on my flying car.
That's right. Soon enough. Soon enough.
So back to the other question that I had was, you know, with all this photo manipulation and editing, at what point does a photo stop being a photo and become more of a digital work? Like, is there, what are the lines? I mean, the lines are very blurry.
Right. I mean, so if an image is altered to the point of changing the majority of someone's features or even becomes unrecognizable, then I would say that is obviously too much.
Yeah, and there are rules in like photojournalism as to what, like how much, like depending on what it is, like it's sort of like, did you just adjust, your lighting levels and contrast a little bit? But if you start changing aspects of the scene, and people have gotten in a lot of trouble for this because they've come back and found like, oh, they like removed a whole person from this picture, or they've, adjusted this and like photoshopped, the background, or made the sky more dramatic in this photo. And it's like, but that's not actually what happened. That's not real.
Right. I mean, everything that we do in say Photoshop, you can say is, it's an illusion. So even like minor retouching or editing, you're changing the original. So it's creating an illusion of sorts. But I do think there are extremes that people have taken it to. And, sometimes people love it, and they, like I said, it's what kind of runs places like Instagram, those apps are filled with those type of images.
And
But
I think it's how people present it to the world. Like if they go through that and like they're saying like, hey, this is a digital work that is totally different. And it's like, okay, like do your art. That's fine, whatever. But it's the people who like take it and then say like, oh, this is a portrait I took. And they're like, it's not really a portrait. If you've, like you said, like you've changed the features of this person, it's not a representation of who they actually are. It's no longer a photo. Like you can't represent it as a photo when, you've taken like, when you talk about compositing, like, like you're taking possibly a bunch of different elements, which could be, different photos, and mixing them all together. Like it's not a photo anymore. It's something completely different.
correct. Yeah.
So you do more digital art work. Like what separates digital art from just image editing?
So I would say that image editing, or in other terms, photo retouching, is a way to enhance an image in a subtle way, or at least I think it should be subtle. Whereas with digital art, there's a clear intention to create something new. So for me, I create digital art that is surreal or imaginative and is very removed from a real subject. The one thing I see a lot in my different groups is people who will show a before and after, and the before will be showing the different original photos with kind of like a solid or large outline of it.
Yeah.
And then on the right will be the finished, new composite that's kind of like a fantasy situation, so someone on a planet or someone on a big rock, and a dramatic moon in the background, and different and dramatic or fantasy-like color grading to it.
Yeah, no, I see those images too, and it just blows me away because I do not have the ability to composite like that, and I wish I did.
There's a lot of amazing artists in these groups.
It's incredible.
I'm pretty proud to be dedicated to it. My original group, Photoshop and Lightroom group on Facebook, I was dedicated to it for like I think 8 years, and it turned out to be like 446,000 members, and then I ended up having to move it over to another group because it just became too much work for me and the admins and moderators.
I was in that group. I saw what was going on. Yeah.
And now that group is just past 190,000 going on 200,000. So people love those groups, and there's a lot of great artists. The thing that I try to do in those groups, though, hope I'm not getting too off topic.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. The thing that I try to focus on in those groups is first, the moderators and admins were not trained, but we go over the way that we do things. And the philosophy of the group is to make it helpful and nice. So a lot of people are showing their work or posting their work to get constructive criticism. And so we always want people to be helpful. And if people are being nasty or mean, they either get muted, and if they repeat offend, then we ban them. But the intention of the group is focused on, people learning and growing. And there's a lot of amazing artists that show their work, artists and photographers. And it's very different than some of the other groups I've seen where they let in Like, we do let people post video tutorials. We want people to learn. But, the majority of people, even if they're from another country, they like it to be in English. So that's one of our rules. And then I've noticed in other groups, they will have like these really loud music video tutorials where no one speaks anything. It's just this,
The shows. It's just like,
abusive, loud
yeah. And
music. And I'm like, how is that helpful to anybody?
yeah,
So
I
I'm
don't.
just kind of perplexed that some other groups don't kind of rein in what the focus should be, and they're kind of like a free for all. And
Well, I think that what you're seeing there is, and it's people who are more using that to try to push their YouTube channels and get more
that's true.
subscribers and plays there. There's a lot of like, hey, come watch my tutorial. And it's just like, but I'm not learning anything from your tutorial. Your tutorial is not really a tutorial. It's just me watching a time lapse of you doing the work, and I'm not really
Right.
learning anything.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point. I've seen people where they will say, "Here's a link to the video tutorial," and you click on it, and the first thing that pops up is subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I mean,
Yes.
it's not like their intention is really to be educational. It is overt self promotion.
Yeah, and there's some very good tutorials out there. I mean, honestly, like you have to sift through and find the ones, but there are some people out there who are really dedicated to teaching.
Yeah. In, in
image editing.
fact, one of the original admins of the Photoshop and Lightroom group, and he's still an admin in the new group, is Jesus Ramirez from the Photoshop Training Channel. And he's done some live video events for the group, which is great. And I'm also friends with Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe. He has a lot of great video tutorials. So a lot of great people sharing their knowledge for years of experience. It's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's refreshing. Sometimes I just like to like look through people's stuff and just kind of be blown away by it, and it's just like this is amazing. Like you said, like some of those images, like people creating these like fantasy worlds from just like 18 different elements, and just making these amazing scenes. And as a nerd, it's just like it's like going to the bookstore when I was a kid, and like looking at the covers of these sci-fi books or fantasy novels, but it feels real. It almost feels real now, as opposed to like a painting.
And I love the variety. I mean, I really the thing I think I like most or love most about the groups is the absolute variety of imagery. So there can be someone who likes to post, these jumping dogs, or their cat portraits, and it's very sweet kind of imagery. And then there's other people who post very dark, surreal imagery. And then there's people who do very fantasy related imagery, and then people do very traditional, classic Rembrandt-esque lighting portraits. And I love that. I love that variety, and I love the fact that there's such a diverse scope of people, styles, and intentions on this planet, in this universe. I mean, it's nice to have such a great variety. It's wonderful.
It's the spice of life. It's and it's you don't get it. I feel like anything that is too like, I don't know, like Facebook groups can go either way, and I really enjoy your groups.
Thanks.
But I think part of the reason is exactly that. Like, it's not just about one thing, and you're only getting like bombarded with, hey, this is what all we're going to do is, this very light and fluffy thing, or we're going to do the very dark, surreal stuff, or just fantasy. Like, you get so much variety that whatever it is that you're into, or just to find like just bathe in the wonder of all the creativity of these people and these groups. It's really amazing.
Right. I think people would get bored if things were that similar and redundant.
Monotonous.
So, monotonous. Yeah.
So, all right, I have a couple of questions left.
Sure.
But one of them, like, and maybe because this is something I brought up in an earlier episode. Do you have any idea what happened to the Adobe Moving Stills project? Do you remember this?
No, not really familiar with it.
One of their like sensei like learning things. It would take your 2-dimensional photograph, and you would put in like certain parameters, like panning from left to right or up, down, or whatever, and it would basically create a 5-second basically like an animated image. It looked 3-dimensional. Like it would move, like the camera would move in or from side to side or up and down. And it made it like their, whatever their, you know, software was doing, it was making it, look like this is a
I
3-dimensional
thought that was an
video.
iPhone feature.
That's an iPhone thing that you can do like with like, portrait mode with a different,
Right, exactly.
yeah, it makes it look like, oh, it kind of turns, but this is actually like, it looks like a video. It looks like the camera is panning in one direction or moving forward or back.
And this was in Photoshop?
Yeah, well, it was at Photoshop, their expo, like their Photoshop World or whatever. They
Oh,
were
okay.
announcing things, and they showed it off. I think this is like
One of their sneaks maybe at Adobe Max?
Adobe Max, and it was like 2.5 or 3 years ago, and they showed it, and then there was never anything about it. And you look it up online now, and all you find is that announcement where they showed it. It like there's nothing ever came of it, and maybe it was too much, like processing power required.
Right. Yeah, so I've been to various Adobe Max, and I've even, before the pandemic, I was a teacher or teacher's assistant in some of the classes, and that was a great experience. And I've seen various sessions of those Adobe sneaks, and they're always exciting. But my take on that is that I believe it's a lot of, engineers, developers who present these projects and they entertain us with these things. And what I think happens is there's a committee or, grouping of people who review things at Adobe, and they see how it develops and evolves. And if it's not evolving well, or if there's a limitation, or it's just not going to happen, it's not functional in some way, then it's probably scrapped.
Yeah.
So I think that they entertain us with these various options and creative opportunities, and then some go through and become features in the programs, and others just drop away, or maybe there's even issues that come up where someone says, "Okay, I presented this at Adobe Sneaks, but I want to get some type of compensation or copyright with it with another company." You know what I mean? I bet those scenarios play out a lot as well, so that they get some other person to, sponsor them or something. You know what I mean?
And my guess is it was not scalable. Is my guess.
Right.
It was just like, this isn't something they could make work. Like the amount of processing power it took to do this. And they were talking about like, oh, it was taking like a minute and a half per image. They had gotten it down to like a minute and a half per, one of these when they would put it in. And I'm like, that still takes a while. Like, like you're not talking about like,
Right.
whatever they're using. I'm guessing they're using a pretty powerful system to create this. And they're like, yeah, we got it down to a couple minutes.
And that might also be kind of revealing itself. Like they might have like a revved up system, and it's still taking a certain amount of time. And then when they start experimenting with it on what they consider a typical kind of working computer with a certain amount of RAM and whatever operating system is current at the moment, they might start seeing faulty things show up, or it basically failing the test of what it was originally supposed to do. And so they end up scrapping it because it just doesn't meet basic requirements of a typical user.
Right. That's my guess, is that it was required too much. But who knows? Maybe somewhere down the line it'll come back. All right.
Yep.
So what are you most excited about in the future of digital editing, image editing, digital art? Like what is on the horizon, and maybe further? Like what is it that you're most intrigued by?
Right. So this kind of brings us back to the beginning of conversation where it's talking about artificial intelligence. So in some way, I'm very fascinated with the whole development of artificial intelligence, trying to make our lives easier. I remember when different aspects of content aware fill came up, and like the healing brush, where you could just, you don't even have to hold down the option key. You just, the spot healing brush, you just click and drag. That kind of way it reads an image and retouches it for you, I love. I think it's been very well done. Also, quick selection tool. I remember even like Scott Kelby raving about it when that first came out. It's all very helpful. But I'm also concerned that there may be a new trend to add features to programs like Photoshop that make it so that people with basic skills can do very simple filters or create a look and then post their image to places like Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
Just like the way that people tired of certain overused filters in the past, I think people will see through the simple processes to try to make an image look good without doing real work.
Yeah.
So I think some of those images lack a certain depth. And so I'm all for development. I'm very curious about artificial intelligence. And I think there's a lot of amazing engineers, developers behind, say, the Photoshop team. And I'm very grateful for them. They've helped me make a living. And also, I love creating in Photoshop my digital art. But I'm just concerned that I just hope that they don't dumb down aspects of Photoshop for the general public, because there's a lot of professionals who use it on a daily basis. So, I mean, if you can keep it balanced the way it is now going forward, where you have people who do extensive retouching, compositing, color correction, and they can get their work done, and also balance it with like easy access to the filters and, features that are very simple and basic for people who that's all they want. And that's great. It's just, I don't want like the basic stuff to start overtaking the professional tools.
Yeah. And I think that's, something that I've seen in like my guess, and Adobe, I feel, has been fairly smart about this. Part of what I would think would happen would be that what you're talking about would probably make its way to an app of some kind on mobile devices.
I mean, all those, right? All those do exist. I mean, there's like Photoshop on the iPad, and
but I'm talking about like as opposed to, I don't know. Have you actually used Photoshop, the Photoshop Camera app?
Right. There's Photoshop Camera, Photoshop Express, Photoshop Fix, Photoshop Mix.
Yeah. There's like 18 different apps. So, I mean, I think that's probably where they would keep that. But like, have you ever actually used the Camera app?
Because I dabble with them. I dabble with them.
Yeah, but, I dabbled too. Like, when it first came out, I was like, oh, this is interesting. But then I was like, okay, maybe this is not for my age group.
I mean, I do respect the development they have done for things like Photoshop for iPad and all that. And it is nice to be able to just, use your finger to move a little slider and you get great results. I think they're working very hard at it. It's just, for me, I guess I'm more traditional.
Yeah.
And I like working on a bigger screen and using a mouse or my Wacom tablet. Maybe I'm a dinosaur.
A couple of T-Rexes.
I don't know. I just like having a large screen and kind of jumping in deeper that
being
way.
able to see the detail as opposed to just kind of like, I'm just going to swipe around on my tablet and now it's done. I feel the same way. It's a, my thoughts on that are I appreciate the development of a lot of things. Like and there are other things that I think most photographers don't even know, like, or exist in a lot of the Adobe suite. Like Adobe Scan is probably one of the greatest, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest apps out there. Has made my
Which one?
Adobe Scan. You'll just like you put documents in there, like you. Just,
I use that.
Yeah,
especially for taxes, right?
Oh yeah, you get your. I organize, receipts. Everything is like boom, boom, done. Like it's
that puts it in perspective really quick for you and makes it better quality without having to move any kind of tonal correction sliders or anything.
And it recognizes text, so it'll be like, oh, what do you want to name this? Like this is what we think you should name this. Like it's. It's brilliant. And I'm just like, this is great. Like, why? Like, I started using it a couple of years ago, and I'm like, why wasn't I using this before? This is a fantastic time saving, and it'll save to your Adobe Cloud if you have it.
Right.
If you have you save all your documents, and you can just share stuff. Like that's made. I mean, people who listen to my parents passed away last year, and I was just able to scan a whole ton of documents and like send them to lawyers and whoever needed stuff like so amazingly quickly, as opposed to I'm going to scan this and try to email it to you or, get it to you. Like mailing stuff during the pandemic was insane. Hats off to Adobe for that app. It's great.
I was going to say a funny thing about the it's not a funny subject, but the beginning of the pandemic, um, just funny state of mind I had was I had this idea that things would get a little bit more easy and relaxed. So I had this concept that like, ooh, I'll have some free time now.
Yeah.
And it was the complete opposite. Like all of a sudden I was like everybody and their grandmother was inviting me to web conferences and video tutorials and asking to be represented for live video events in my groups, which I love to do. But it just, where I used to do like one or two in the groups, all of a sudden I was doing like 4 or 5 a month. So
Yeah, it just
it's
like
been busy.
on the online aspect of things has just exploded in the last year. I think that in some ways it's here to stay. Like,
Oh, so let me ask you a question.
sure,
May I?
turn the tables.
Yeah. So question is you know, doing this podcast show, and it's a great show, and the interest that you have and have been doing for years. What is your viewpoint of Clubhouse?
I don't know. I enjoy Clubhouse sometimes. There are other times that like I've it's gotten to a point I feel like I that first month that I was there, I was just like really excited by it. There was
Right.
a lot of excitement. It was also one of the first times that people were really being social again in groups. That kind of like you were able to talk to people, and I host rooms. Um, the it's also gotten to a point where I'm busy doing other stuff now, and people are like why aren't you on Clubhouse all the time? And it's like I can't devote as much time as I was earlier this year to it. And
Right.
I know other people who are like like I'm primarily a wedding photographer, and I know a lot of people in the wedding industry who are like, well, like we got to gear up for weddings again, and they're doing stuff, and it's like we can't spend as much time on Clubhouse. I enjoy Clubhouse. I would like to start doing more live recording of podcast episodes on there. And because like we could do a Q&A. Like that's like
Right.
one of the things I did a couple of episodes that I recorded there, but like, the people didn't want to raise their hand. Like it was still
Yep.
sort of like, hey, what questions do you have? And it was like I had to edit out like they were even on Clubhouse because nobody was raising their hands and answering questions. So it just kind of seemed like moot to leave
Yeah.
that in there. But
Yeah, I was going to say I have very similar view of it. Where in the beginning it was like this is pretty cool, and it's excited about different topics or themes for different rooms slash events, and then they were talking about the idea of creating your own club, and then you could apply for that, and then all of a sudden they made it so that anyone could basically open. So I created, 2 clubs, and my intention for that was to have various friends have different rooms on different days, and it not just like be my club about me or anything, but about Photoshop and photography, and have various people. Like some might be purely on photography, some might be about retouching, and that's the way it's evolved. The thing is that in time, I've noticed that it has become very redundant, and so I see a lot of the same. Like I'm into digital art, but most of the digital art rooms on Clubhouse are about NFTs.
yeah,
And I'm curious about NFTs, but not that much. I mean, it's like every single day I see like many rooms about NFTs, and it's like it just seems boring. So
I also
it's
think they got to work on their ability to search rooms. Like not just to have an
absolutely
algorithm, like not just have
totally
an
agree.
algorithm that like shows you
You know,
rooms. There needs to be a
But you can
better system.
right, you can search for a club, but why can't you search for a room? I want to find out what's going on like now, not just see what's listed, but is there
Right.
something I'm missing? I bet I'm missing a lot.
Yeah, and that's the
But
thing. It's like you're only allowed to see like whatever the algorithm chooses, like rooms in the hallway that you can see, versus like oh, I can see what rooms my friends are in, and like maybe
right,
join that room. But like yeah, I feel like how am I meeting,
right.
or finding the things that I want to be a part of when I can't
Sure.
search for that?
I think they're talking about that, developing that.
And I
And then
think
supposed to open up to Android users in May, maybe probably more like the end of May. But
yeah.
to be fair, the one thing I would say though is have had some great conversations, and there is
Oh
some
yeah.
really great real sharing going on.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one aspect. Two, in fact, one of the rooms in my under my club, Photoshop and Photography, that is hosted by Hannah Dare Walker. She does these amazing interviews, and she does a lot of work. So she, finds out information about the different aspects of, say, this artist or photographer, and brings those up as questions. Do you want to speak about this period of your life? And she does a great job. And that, I believe, is on Saturdays. Alyssa Rosenberg does one on Tuesdays, Joy Photography. And she's also getting more busy. So that's become more of a spontaneous one. Mondays is Rob Sylvan for Lightroomers, about Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom. So that's great. And that becomes very kind of technical. A lot of people showing up with questions. I do one on Wednesday called Photoshop and Photography, and that's focused on a whole range. Maybe it'll be on Photoshop or photography. And I do like to also have more kind of casual interviews. So I'll have a guest speaker. Thursdays is Dennis Dunbar, and he does Push in Pixels about retouching, and he's sometimes hosted or guest host of Earth Oliver, Lisa Carney, Igor. I forgot his last name. But some great experienced retouchers who join in the conversation.
I was in a room with Earth.
So yeah, it's a great spectrum, great spectrum if you kind of can balance it well. But there is some redundancy, but there is also some kind of magical moments where I found like this one guy that was like a Japanese Zen master who mixes like Zen chanting or kind of like monk chanting with like synthesizer. And so it's very creative music rooms that you can jump into.
I was in a room. I hosted a room. I've fallen off in hosting it. It was like the nerdy photographer, Q&A room. It was just like, come in, ask whatever questions you have about photography. Like, and this guy came in and he's like, I'm going to turn the tables on you. I was like, okay. He goes, if you could do one project, what would it be? And I was just like, wow, it's been like the pandemic had been so hard, and like I had been through so much emotionally at that point. Like I was like having trouble. I'm like, I can't think of anything. And I checked his account, and clicked over to his Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him like, are these your photos? And he was like, yeah. And he had these incredible underwater like fashion shoots.
Is this Brett Stanley?
He's in, no,
that's one thing I really loved about my groups is I will have them, some of the great artists, photographers, I will have them as featured in my Photoshop and photography newsletter, and he's been featured. So Brett Stanley does some great work.
I think like that it was because Brett charges a significant sum of money for his prints. This guy owns a restaurant in England and wanted this type of image because it's a seafood restaurant. Wanted these underwater images, like big, like 10 by 10, on display in his restaurant. And he's like, well, it was going to cost me north of 6 figures to get these prints. So I decided to teach myself,
right,
and set the stuff up for myself. And I'm looking at this stuff. I'll find it. The guy is in message to you. He's incredible. And I was just like, this is just something like we just happened into each other. And I was just like, this is amazing. These photos are insane. He's like, yeah, think about like, here's how it works. Cause he was like, it's all underwater lighting and these very long dresses, like, a lot of these. And he was like, imagine setting up your entire photo studio
underwater.
I know. He's like in the dark. And then going like when you meet the model, telling her, like describing it to her. And then she's got to go, like, we're going to walk into the studio with the lights completely off. And she has to miss everything in the studio and get to the exact right spot. And then I start taking pictures. I was just like, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's fascinating the way that they set up like props for them to, go into the water. And it's not just like, okay, we'll set up the props, take the photo, and then take a regular model shoot in a regular setting and then cut it out in Photoshop and put it in. No, it's they do the whole 9 yards where they go down into the water and, it's basically live. It's not compositing.
Yeah. And he was like, and you only have about like a minute to shoot before you have to like come up for air and then, go do it. Like,
I mean, that's probably the big part of the fun is the challenge, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's life itself, right?
Supremely challenging.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how we handle the situation.
Did you have a contract?
Well, I had one I found for free online, but my lawyer says it might not hold up.
Next time, you should head over to nerdyphotographer.com. They've got a selection of contract templates for weddings, events, portrait sessions, and even for hiring second photographers and associate photographers, which would certainly have helped you in your current situation.
Really? I will check that out. Nerdyphotographer.com?
Yep, nerdyphotographer.com. They've got all sorts of contracts and agreements that can help make sure to protect you and your clients. So what are you going to do?
Well, we just have to wait and see what happens, I guess.
So, no pants on?
Who know anything below the waist? Totally Porky Pig in it.
Impressive.
Not really. It was pretty cold out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Steve.
And we host the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast, a lighthearted look at the vast world of wedding photography.
That's what we're doing? I thought we were making a podcast about drinking beers, flying drones.
Did you even take yours out of the box?
Coping with your post-wedding hangover, social media etiquette, and wearing moon shoes.
They're not moon shoes, Steve. They're just...
But seriously, check us out if you want to have a laugh and learn a thing or two about shooting weddings and running a wedding photography business.
You can find the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
So that being said, it's time for our useless information for this episode. Andrew, I don't know if you've ever been, speaking of walking into a dark room, if you've ever been in a very dark room or opened your eyes in a dark room, like no lights whatsoever, it doesn't actually appear black. It kind of appears gray. Have you ever noticed that? Like your eyes.
So
when you're in a completely dark room with your eyes closed and then you open them up, it doesn't actually appear black. It appears kind of grayish.
That's interesting.
That color actually has a name, and it's called Eigengrau.
Sounds like something that you eat while you're at a happy hour in like Finland or something.
Yeah, it has a very like Norwegian or Germanic kind of sound to it. But yeah, it's called Eigengrau, and that is the grayish color that you see when you open your eyes in a completely black room.
Good to know. Good to know.
Now you know. Knowing is half the battle. The other half is red lasers and blue lasers. Andrew, thank you very much for being on. I would like to give you a chance, like if you want to let people know where they can find you, like where your Facebook groups are. Or...
Right. I was going to say, good to give a little shout out at the end. So first, as always, I'd like to say thank you to my admins and moderators who are dedicated daily to the Facebook groups. They've been pretty intense for more than 10 years now. So thanks everyone throughout time who has helped and who is helping now. And so on Facebook, where I seem to be living, like it or not, I run the Photoshop and Lightroom group, which just passed 190,000. The Photoshop and Photography group, which passed 90,000. I started a strange and surreal art group where I'm having some other admins maybe kind of step in and do a little bit more for that, kind of give them the playground for that. And then I started a new one called Digital Art, where I wanted to kind of build that one up and let a lot of digital artists showcase their work. Being on Clubhouse, being on Facebook, I'm aware that there's a lot of photographers and I'm more of a digital artist. So I also wanted to balance, some of the groups that were focused on pure digital art and, surreal, strange type of artwork and not just photography. So yeah, those are the ones I do. And like I said, you were saying?
We'll include a link to those groups
Excellent.
on a blog post that goes along with this episode. So if you're wondering how to get there directly, if you don't want to just try to search for it, you come on over to nerdyphotographer.com and find the blog post that goes with this episode, and we'll send you right to those.
And if you are on Clubhouse, you can do a search in the top left. Make sure you click on the Clubs tab and just search for Photoshop and Photography. I think that's about 2,500 members now, or followers. lot of great rooms throughout the week. Pretty good. I started a digital art one on Clubhouse, but I've yet to kind of jump into it.
Well, I think it's a little maybe a little visual. Like, there's like it takes a certain amount of dedication to get people to talk about like visual stuff. I've noticed that in photography too, like getting people to actually like we talk about a lot of things that go into the business side of it, and just the emotional aspects of things. I salute you for doing more of the like the visual, like talking about a visual medium and things on Clubhouse. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big skill is trying to balance it all and also know when to ask for help when you need it. So, I'm very grateful for the admins and moderators who help keep things going and are there when, I'm busy with freelance work or another project. So,
well, thanks, Andrew. Yeah. We'll definitely point everybody that direction. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you. It was great.
Welcome back. Thank you to Andrew Kavanagh for being on the program. You can find Andrew on Instagram at Digital Artist Drew, or you can find links in the episode notes to the Photoshop and photography groups he runs on Facebook. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or Good Pods. You can find those links in the episode notes as well, or at nerdyphotographer.com/podcast. You can also follow The Nerdy Photographer on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok at The Nerdy Photo. Golden, I would not start the machine until we install the proper failsafes. I have a bad feeling about this. Until next time, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.
It's time to feel the rage. Join us on Film Rage, where we talk movies, current releases, coming attractions, streaming, and classic films as well. Directors and actors beware, as you cannot hide from the rage. My name is Bryce, and I'm part of the Film Rage crew, which also includes Jim.
Hey.
And Murray.
Yo.
Why is it you always talk all the time? I can't understand why your voice is so...
This is the Merman, the voice of reason. These two can't agree on anything most of the time. Some movies are mondo, some are just... Every week, something is going to make us rage. Join us every Wednesday and
feel the rage.